Have you ever wondered about the inspirations for your favorite media? Better question, have you ever traveled to real historic locations that inspired it? From real history to natural phenomena only found here, this is exactly what I did during my trip to Japan, and I'll be sharing my discoveries. This past winter, I was able to visit Japan for a couple of weeks. During that time, I was able to spend a few days in the Nagano prefecture, or more specifically in Suwa, a city situated around the prominent Lake Suwa, otherwise known as Suwako. For most visitors, it is a city known for its natural hot springs and historic shrines. However, for fans of the Touhou Project, it is a region that has deeply influenced the series through its history, culture, and geography, most notably Touhou Fujinroku, Mountain of Faith. The most prominent of these influences is of course Suwa Daimyojin, or Suwa Taisha, a complex of 4 shrines explained by the Nihon Shoki to already be standing in the late 7th century. It is considered to be one of the oldest shrine complexes in existence. The term myojin was used to refer to notable kami and the shrines that held them. The 4 main shrines are divided into 2 upper and 2 lower shrines, with some 60 other auxiliary shrines scattered around Suwa. I'll be talking about a few of them as well, but for now, let's take a look around Suwa. The first of these shrines that we visited immediately after arriving was Shimosha Akimiya, one of the lower shrines. I should also note here that our visit was right after New Year's, meaning people would be actively visiting the shrines for Atsumode, which is the first shrine visit of the Japanese New Year. This is why you'll see a lot of visitors right now, as well as the remnants of celebrations from just a few days prior. Yasaka Tome no Mikoto is enshrined here from August to February before being transferred to the other lower shrine, Harumiya, for the duration of February to July, Haru for spring, and Aki for fall. Pretty easy to remember. The first thing you'll notice at Akimiya is Kagura-den, which can be found in the background of Kanako's spell cards from the game. You can tell these shrines get a lot of visits from Touhou fans just by checking out the emma hung at the shrines. These are the ones I found at Akimiya. Following this, we went right to the other lower shrine, Harumiya. 2 of Yasaka Kanako's spell cards actually have origins here, the first being Tsutsugayu Kami no Kayu, or God's Rice Porridge, a reference to the ritual that happens here on the 15th of January known as Tsutsugayu Shinji at Tsutsugayuden, pictured here. The ritual involves placing reed tubes in a porridge of rice and adzuki beans, from which the amount of gruel that seeps into the tube tells the success of crops for the next harvest. The second spell card's inspiration is more clearly visible, Musubi no Sugi. This large cedar tree is the inspiration for Kanako's extra stage spell, Sugi de Musubu Furuki Enishi, or Ancient Fate Linked by Cedars. This tree is called the Cedar of Matchmaking because of its bifurcated trunk and is considered a power spot. And of course, here are the emma for Harumiya. You might think we took a break at this point, but we were only going to be in Suwa until our train the next morning, so we started the long trek to the upper shrines. Now, I mentioned Yasaka Tome no Mikoto was enshrined at the lower shrines, and if the spell cards didn't, the name might have given away that she is indeed the inspiration for Yasaka Kanako. Taki Minakata no Mikoto, Yasaka Tome's husband, is the god worshipped at the upper shrines. Can you guess which Touhou character takes inspiration from Taki Minakata? That's right! Yasaka Kanako! In Touhou canon, everything Kanako did, including the Great Suwa War, would make them Taki Minakata. But she doesn't just take from Yasaka Tome's name. In one story involving the goddess, when Yasaka Tome left her husband's place and moved to the north of Lake Suwa, where the 2 shrines that make up the lower shrine currently stand, she took with her a wad of cotton soaked in hot water. Upon arriving in her new home, she dropped the cotton ball on the ground. Hot spring water gushed out from the spot where the cotton fell. This is considered to be the mythical origin of the hot springs of the town of Shimosua. Yasaka Tome's association with hot springs could be an inspiration for Kanako's involvement in the events of subterranean animism. So what about Suwako? Well, she was the god that Taki Minakata defeated in the war, Moriya no Kami. This is known as the Great Suwa War. Moriya's weapon was said to be an iron ring, which you can see Suwako use in Hiso Tensoku, as well as the name of her spell card, Moriya's Iron Ring. Upon her surrender, Moriya and her descendants would be made to serve the Suwa shrine as head priests. One of these descendants, of course, being Kochiya Sanae. So, that was a lot of names, but it's not too bad. In case you're wondering where Suwako is enshrined, she's at Moriya Jinja in Okaya. While the 4 Suwa Taisha shrines tend to have a lot of Touhou-themed emmas, Moriya Jinja tends to have not only a much higher percentage, but many other Touhou-themed offerings. And after a long walk, we finally made it to Kamisha Honmiya, the main shrine of Suwa Taisha. This is unsurprisingly the shrine with the most visits. Even though New Year's was a few days ago, there's still plenty of stalls open with visitors walking around. And of course, here's a quick shot of some of the ema we found there. There's a couple more spell card inspirations here. One is Otensui no Kiseki, Miracle of Otensui. This refers to one of the 7 wonders of Suwa Taisha. 3 drops of water are said to fall into a small building in the main compound known as the Tenryu Suisha every day, no matter what the weather is like. Crops watered with it will not die, and using it in prayers for rain ensures the prayer's success. Also, remember that rice porridge spell? On hard mode, this spell is replaced with a spell called Unremembered Crop. While the ritual for the porridge is only done at Harumiya, in the past it used to be held at the main shrine as well. It is believed that this spell is a reference to this old tradition. We now had one main shrine left to visit, and we were planning to do so before it got dark. So once more, we began walking, this time to Kamisha Maemiya, the former shrine. This shrine felt a bit more humble than the previous ones we visited, but I liked the scenery here the most. You go up a long hill path leading to a small shrine that sits in the shade. To the side is a river that runs along the path, and on the way back you can see quite a bit of the city. You might be surprised to know that this river that runs along the path to the shrine, known as Suiga no Seiryu, is yet another inspiration for one of Kanako's spell cards, Suiga no Gotoki Utsukushi Gensen, or Beautiful Spring like Suiga. There's also a Touhou-themed cafe here that I would have loved to visit and show you, but unfortunately it was closed at the time. Hopefully I'll get to try again next year. But at this point, it was time for us to finally head to our hotel. And I have to say, it was easily the best hospitality I've ever had. We roomed on the superb view floor, which was located at the top of the hotel, aside from the room at the very top, reserved for large parties. But even from where we were, as the name implied, we had a lovely view of Lake Suwa, which was only a minute walk away. And while this wasn't my first time in Japan, it was my first time experiencing the Japanese onsen, which was an experience. I'd love to share photos, but unfortunately my video camera would have been damaged from the heat, so you'll have to settle for this artistic rendition. There was also a nice little gift shop that sold all sorts of local goods. There's merchandise of the different mascots, including Suwahime, who we saw quite often on signs and shops and other buildings as we walked around the city. But I think the highlight of staying here had to be the food. For both dinner and the next morning's breakfast, we were treated to a 5-course meal of some of the best food I've ever had in a long time. And after walking around for just under 30 kilometers that day and soaking in the onsen, I was ready to eat. The next morning, we left the hotel, but not before the woman who took care of our service gave me a gift. I was told they don't normally give those out to everyone, so suffice to say, I had to give them the highest recommendation I can. But with that done, it was finally time to do some more sightseeing before our return to Tokyo. And what better way to continue than with some more history and culture about the region? Onbashira Matsuri is a festival that takes place every 7 years in Suwa that involves replacing 4 wooden pillars that stand at the 4 corners of local shrines. The most prominent of these are the ones found at the 4 main shrines of Suwa Taisha. One of the pillars at Maemiya, Ninomiya Bashira, is actually pictured inside of the case of Touhou Ten, Mountain of Faith. But this isn't the only reference to the Onbashira festival. Kanako's very first spell card on lower difficulties is Divine Festival Expanded Onbashira. Likewise, you'll probably see a lot of pillar imagery anywhere with regard to the in-game Moriya Shrine. One of Suwako's cards, Nanatsu no Ishi to Nanatsu no Ki, or 7 stones and 7 trees, also takes inspiration from sacred stones and trees scattered across Suwa and the adjacent city, Shino. You might also be wondering about Suwako's Frog Association. Well, there happens to be a frog hunting ritual that takes place in the upper shrines every New Year's Day, in which frogs are skewered and offered to the shrine. The origins of this are said to be Suwa Myojin's defeat of a wild frog deity. 2 of Suwako's spell cards reference this: Frog Hunt, the snake eats the croaking frog, and Red Frog of Hoei 4, which refers to a year in which the ritual was almost cancelled following heavy flooding, only for 3 frogs to miraculously be discovered, allowing the ritual to continue. Oh, and I haven't forgotten Sanae. She doesn't have much lore about her, but I did visit the old head priest's residence, who was said to descend from Taki Minakata. However, it was Moriya's descendants who actually ran the shrines. I even managed to pick up a pamphlet that talks about it. I've linked a tweet of mine containing pictures of the pamphlet in the description. There's a few more shrines we visited that I want to talk about, namely Ashinaga and Tenaga Jinja. These can be translated roughly to long leg and long arm. The gods of these shrines, as per their names, were giants, one with long arms and the other with long legs. They were said to be servants of Suwa, but despite this, Suwako is the one with a spell card referencing them, Tenaga and Ashinaga. Now, I saved what I consider to be the most interesting shrine for last. You see, Suwa Lake has a natural phenomenon that only occurs after a rare series of temperature fluctuations that result in the lake freezing over with a large cracked ridge along its length. This phenomena is known as Omiwatari, or God's Crossing. The crossing is believed to be Taki Minakata leaving his sanctuary to meet his wife by walking on frozen water. Omiwatari has only appeared 4 times since Mountain of Faith was released, though in the past, it was very rare for a year in which Omiwatari did not appear. This shrine, Yatsurugi Jinja, actually handles the ritual for Omiwatari worship, and of course, Kanako has a spell card for this, Omiwatari the God Walked. There is one last place that we went to before returning to Tokyo, Tateishi Park. It's actually famous for a non-Touhou related reason. This location was prominently featured in the movie Kimi no Nawa, or Your Name, and you can often find couples coming here year-round. In fact, the main female lead's village was inspired by Suwa itself. But aside from that, it gives us this amazing view of the entire lake and the city surrounding it. Looking south, which is just to the left, you can actually see Mount Moriya. And behind us would be none other than Gensokyo, which is situated around the Yatsugatake mountain range. When I was filming this, there was only one thing on my mind, which was that I could never have imagined a game series that I started playing as a middle schooler more than 15 years ago would lead me to filming historical locations in Japan for however many thousands of viewers. It was a moment I'll never forget, and I think it was the perfect place to conclude my journey through Suwa. And on that note, I hope to see you again next time.